It started on a Tuesday, which felt rude. Nothing dramatic ever happens on Tuesdays. Tuesdays are for expired yogurt, NPR hosts with calming voices, and the quiet humiliation of realizing your knees now make decisions without consulting you first. I borrowed my husband's car that morning because mine was in the shop again. Apparently even vehicles hit a certain age and just give up. Relatable. I had exactly 40 minutes before yoga. Hot yoga, to be precise. The kind where everyone pretends they're there for flexibility, when really we're all auditioning for emotional survival. I reached into the passenger side door to grab a tissue. My nose always runs before class like it's trying to escape my body early, and my fingers touched something cold, metallic, and absolutely not mine. A small gold earring. I stared at it, the way you stare at a stranger who looks disturbingly like your cousin. Too elegant to be lost. Too intentional to be accidental. It wasn't costume jewelry. It wasn't cheap. It was the kind of earring worn by a woman who moisturizes her elbows and doesn't apologize for ordering oysters alone. For exactly half a second, I wondered if I was losing my mind. This is what 32 years of marriage will do to you. You don't immediately think he's cheating. You think, oh God, is this early dementia? I held the earring between my fingers, waiting for a memory to rush back. Maybe I had a secret nightlife. Maybe I transformed after 10 p.m. into a woman with pierced ears and standards. Nope, I don't wear earrings anymore. Haven't since my late 40s, when one of them got caught in a scarf, and I briefly considered suing Winter. My ears are pierced, yes, but they've been on a quiet retirement plan for years. I placed the earring in the cup holder like it might start explaining itself. The radio kept talking. The traffic light stayed red. The world did not crack open. That, I think, was the most insulting part. The universe did not pause for my betrayal. It didn't even lower the volume. I drove to yoga anyway. Shock does interesting things to the body. I held tree pose longer than I ever had before. Turns out discovering your husband's infidelity sharpens focus. Who knew? While everyone else was wobbling, I stood there calm, rooted, and suddenly very, very aware that I had been balancing on someone else's life for decades. In the locker room, women chatted about sourdough starters and adult children who don't call back. I said nothing. I put the earring into my jacket pocket with the care usually reserved for evidence or small animals. Back home, I placed it on the kitchen counter. Morning light hit it just right. It shimmered, confident, unashamed, like it belonged exactly where it was. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I made tea. I noticed my hands were steady, which felt like a personal insult. After everything, after childbirth, menopause, a marriage built on being reasonable, this was the moment my nervous system decided to perform flawlessly. I stared at that earring and thought, very calmly, interesting, because something in me, old, tired, and finally awake, recognized the feeling. This wasn't devastation. This was the universe, done whispering. By noon, the earring had not moved. Neither had my life, technically. That's the strange thing about betrayal at this age. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives like a typo in a document you've been editing for decades. Small, correctable, easy to ignore if you're tired enough. I sat at the kitchen table and tried to remember when I became a reasonable woman. I wasn't born this way. In my 20s, I had opinions that entered rooms before I did. In my 30s, I still believed being loud was a form of honesty. Somewhere around 45, I learned the value of letting things go, which turned out to be a very efficient way of letting myself go with them. My husband loved to tell people I was low maintenance. This was said as a compliment, the way you praise a couch that doesn't stain easily. Being low maintenance meant I didn't ask questions when he came home late. It meant I didn't mind when his phone tilted away from me like it was shy. It meant I laughed when his mother said, "You're so independent, dear," which was code for "you don't inconvenience us." I was proud of it. God help me, I was proud. When something felt off, I told myself I was being dramatic. When I noticed absences, emotional, physical, conversational, I explained them away like a loyal press secretary. Work stress, midlife fog, men aren't good at talking, all the classics. Gaslighting doesn't always come with cruelty. Sometimes it comes with a soft voice and a concerned look. "You're overthinking," he'd say, gently as if handing me a warm blanket. "You worry too much," like it was a character flaw, not a survival skill. "It's nothing," repeated enough times that nothing became my favorite meal. I learned to doubt my instincts the way other women learn French. I remembered the dinners where I spoke less because he spoke more. The parties where I stood slightly behind him, nodding, holding a drink I didn't want, smiling at jokes I'd heard in 1998. I remembered being thanked, not loved, but thanked, for being understanding. Understanding is a very convenient trait in a woman you plan to disappoint. The earring watched me from the counter. Silent, patient. It didn't demand explanations. It didn't try to make me feel crazy. It simply existed, which felt aggressive. I laughed once, out loud. A short, sharp sound. 32 years. 2 pregnancies. 1 miscarriage no one likes to talk about. A career I bent around his schedule like soft metal. And here I was, negotiating with myself over whether I was allowed to be angry. That's when it hit me. Not like lightning, but like arthritis. Slow, deep, unignorable. I had spent most of my life as background scenery. Tasteful, inoffensive, easily replaced. I wasn't the lead. I was the woman holding the coats. The realization didn't break me. It embarrassed me, because the worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was how well I had trained myself to accept it. I picked up the earring and closed my hand around it, the metal pressed into my palm, sharp enough to register. For the first time that day, I felt something solid, and I thought, very clearly, very calmly, I'm not going to be reasonable about this. Not anymore. Once I decided I wasn't going to be reasonable, an unexpected thing happened. I got curious. Not the hysterical phone-checking, spiral at 2 a.m. kind of curiosity. This was quieter, colder, the kind that sharpens your vision instead of blurring it. I poured myself a second cup of tea and sat down across from the earring like we were about to negotiate. I examined it properly this time. Small but not shy. Gold but not loud. Clean lines. No unnecessary sparkle. The kind of piece chosen by a woman who doesn't buy jewelry to impress men. She buys it because she already knows who she is. This wasn't something grabbed at the airport 5 minutes before boarding. This was intentional. Which told me something important. She wasn't 25 and lost. She wasn't confused. She wasn't going through a phase. And she definitely wasn't crying into my husband's shoulder about her childhood. She had taste. That realization landed oddly. I expected jealousy, rage, the urge to smash a plate, maybe. Instead, I felt respect, thin, begrudging, but unmistakable. If you're going to help dismantle my life, at least have decent accessories. I surprised myself by smiling. There's a particular freedom that comes with being 58 and finally admitting the truth. Your husband's affair partner is not always the villain. Sometimes she's just the woman who refused to accept the role you trained yourself to play. I didn't hate her. I didn't even dislike her. What I felt was something much more dangerous. Interest. I tried to picture her, the way she stood, the way she laughed, probably without covering her mouth, the way she listened to him, not because she believed him, but because she was deciding whether he was worth the time. I imagined her reaching into his car, unfastening the earring, careless or confident enough to leave it behind. That detail mattered. Women who sneak don't leave things behind. Women who believe they belong do. I thought about all the years I checked restaurant chairs before sitting down, just in case I inconvenienced someone. All the times I lowered my voice, softened my edges, edited myself mid-sentence. And somewhere out there was a woman who lost an earring and assumed, correctly, it would be waiting for her. The earring didn't feel like evidence anymore. It felt like an invitation. I set it down beside my laptop and opened my calendar. Company fundraiser next month, cocktail attire, +1s encouraged. My husband had mentioned it casually, the way you mention weather you don't expect to be affected by. I closed the calendar. Too soon. This wasn't about confrontation. I wasn't interested in tears or shouting or any scene that would allow him to paint me as emotional, unstable, or, his favorite word, confused. No. If I was going to do something, it had to be elegant, subtle, memorable. I picked the earring back up and turned it slowly between my fingers. The metal caught the light, calm and unbothered. I wondered how it would feel against skin. How sensitive that skin might be. How long discomfort could hide behind a polite smile. A thought drifted through my mind, unannounced and fully formed. She's going to wear this again. And for the first time since Tuesday morning, I laughed. Not sharply, not bitterly, but with genuine amusement. Because suddenly, I wasn't imagining what they had done to me. I was imagining what I could do with what they had given me. And that changed everything. The thing about turning points is that they rarely announce themselves. There was no thunder, no mirror monologue, just me, alone in my kitchen, barefoot on cool tile, holding an earring like it might confess if I stared long enough. I put it down and opened the fridge. Milk, lemons, leftover salmon I no longer trusted. And there on the second shelf, slightly tilted like it was leaning in to listen, was a small glass bottle of chili oil. Dark red, viscous, flecked with seeds that meant business. I'd bought it months ago, after watching a cooking show hosted by a woman half my age who spoke about heat like it was a personality trait. I used it sparingly, a few drops on noodles, a controlled thrill. I like to live dangerously in teaspoons. I stared at the bottle longer than necessary. Let me be clear. I am not a violent person. I have never keyed a car. I return shopping carts. I still say excuse me when someone steps on my foot. Whatever happened next did not come from rage. It came from clarity. I picked up the earring again. Such a polite little thing. So smooth. So innocent. It had done nothing wrong except exist in the wrong marriage. I poured a drop of chili oil onto a paper towel. Just one. Then, very carefully, like a woman who had raised children, balanced budgets, and learned how to cut chicken against the grain, I polished the earring. Front, back, the post, the tiny curve where metal meets skin. I was thorough, but loving. You might even call it attentive. Not enough to see, not enough to smell, enough to feel. I washed my hands twice afterward. Old habits die hard. I wiped the counter. I put the chili oil back where it belonged. The kitchen looked exactly the same, which I found deeply satisfying. The earring gleamed. If anyone had walked in at that moment, they would have seen a 58-year-old woman standing in a quiet, tasteful kitchen, holding a piece of jewelry and smiling faintly, like she'd just remembered a very good joke. I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me. What I felt was balanced, as if something inside me, long tilted toward accommodation, had finally leveled out. For decades, I had swallowed discomfort to keep peace. Now, I had simply redistributed it. Fair is fair. I wrapped the earring in a clean napkin and set it in my purse. I didn't rush. I didn't rehearse explanations. I wasn't even angry anymore. Anger requires energy. This required patience. Later that evening, my husband came home and kissed my cheek. I noticed how his eyes slid away from mine just a fraction too quickly. A detail I had been trained not to notice. We ate dinner. We talked about nothing. I laughed in the right places. I listened like a professional. At one point, he said, "You seem relaxed lately." "I am," I said truthfully. After he went to bed, I took his car keys from the hook by the door. My hands didn't shake. I walked down to the garage, opened the passenger door, and placed the earring back exactly where I'd found it. Same spot, same angle. Continuity matters. I closed the door softly and stood there for a moment, breathing in the faint smell of leather and something sweeter. His cologne? Probably. Or guilt. Hard to tell with men. As I rode the elevator back up, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd done something cruel, but because, for the first time in a very long marriage, I had done something intentional. Upstairs in bed, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. She would find it. She would wear it. And when she did, something would change. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. And I drifted off to sleep, knowing something else, too. Something that made me smile in the dark. This wasn't revenge, this was rehearsal. The hardest part wasn't returning the earring. The hardest part was behaving like nothing inside me had shifted. Once you stop being reasonable, you realize how much effort it takes to appear reasonable. It's a performance. A lifelong one. Smile here, nod there. Don't ask questions that might ruin the evening. I had mastered it so thoroughly that slipping back into the role felt almost comforting, like muscle memory with better posture. My husband didn't notice a thing. This, too, hurt in a very specific way. He drank his coffee. He complained about traffic. He kissed me goodbye with the same distracted affection he'd perfected over the years. The kind that said, "I know where you belong in my day, and it is not in the center." I watched him leave, then stood by the window until his car disappeared down the street. Only then did I allow myself to exhale. I became exemplary. I answered his texts promptly. I asked about his meetings. I listened, really listened, when he talked about work. The names, the politics, the quiet rivalries. I had been married long enough to know which details mattered and which ones were camouflage. "You're in such a good mood lately," he said one night, surprised. I smiled. "Should I apologize?" He laughed. I stored the sound away for later use. There's power in being underestimated, especially when people think they know you. I had spent decades cultivating the image of a woman who would never make a scene, never act out, never embarrass anyone, least of all her husband. That image became my camouflage. Inside, though, something else was happening. I paid attention. I noticed patterns I had once explained away. The way his phone never left his hand, but somehow was never in it when I entered the room. The way certain meetings ran late on the same days each week. The way he started using phrases that weren't his, new inflections, borrowed confidence. He was evolving. So was I. One afternoon, while folding laundry, another skill I had mastered without applause, I found myself laughing. Not because anything was funny, but because I finally understood the advantage of being invisible. You hear everything. I didn't confront him. I didn't search his phone. I didn't ask questions designed to make him defensive. Those are the moves of women still hoping to be reassured. I was past reassurance. What I needed was timing. The invitation arrived in my inbox on a Thursday afternoon, nestled between a dentist reminder and a charity newsletter I never read. Company fundraiser, rooftop venue, cocktail attire, +1 encouraged. I forwarded it to him with a simple message, "Looks nice." He replied almost immediately. "Yeah, should be good networking." Networking. Such an innocent word for a room full of secrets wearing good shoes. That night over dinner he mentioned it casually, like it hadn't already begun rearranging itself in my mind. "Do you want to go?" he asked. I met his eyes and held them just a second longer than usual, long enough to feel him shift. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to." And I meant it. After he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I didn't search for her. Not yet. I searched for him, his company, the guest list, the sponsors. Old instincts, repurposed. On the counter, the chili oil caught the light. I smiled at it like an old accomplice. This wasn't about catching them. It was about letting them walk, confidently and beautifully, into a room where I would finally stop holding the coats. And for the first time I wasn't playing defense, I was setting the stage. I didn't plan on meeting Gary. He entered my life the way most important things do at this age, through administrative incompetence. It started with an email, a reply-all situation. Someone in my husband's company sent out a spreadsheet meant for internal eyes only and forgot that the guest list for the fundraiser included spouses, names, affiliations, donation tiers. A small miracle disguised as a clerical error. I scrolled without urgency. I wasn't hunting yet. I was grazing. And then I saw her name. Not highlighted, not bolded, just sitting there like it paid rent. I didn't feel a jolt. I felt recognition, the way you recognize a face you've never seen but somehow already know. Her last name matched the name of a consulting firm my husband had mentioned once, dismissively, as helpful but intense. Helpful, intense, so was caffeine. I clicked. LinkedIn, public profile, nothing scandalous, accomplished, clean. Mid-40s, maybe. Tasteful headshot, the kind of woman who doesn't tilt her head to appear smaller. Then I saw him, married. Profile photo, a man standing slightly off-center, smiling politely, like he'd been told to. Gary, CFO of something unsexy but profitable. Northwestern alum. 2 grown kids, a wedding anniversary post from 3 years ago with a caption that read, "Couldn't do life without you." Men always say that. They rarely mean it the same way twice. I closed my laptop and went for a walk. It was one of those Chicago afternoons where the air feels borrowed, sunlight but no warmth, like the city is letting you have a nice day on credit. I walked longer than necessary, thinking about how lives overlap without ever touching, how close we can get to the truth without seeing it. By the time I got home, I knew something else too. If there was an earring, there was a pattern. If there was a pattern, there was a man somewhere explaining things away. Gary didn't need a dramatic entrance, he needed context. I sent a message. Short, polite, impossible to misread. "Hi Gary, this is gonna sound strange. I think we may have something in common. If you're open to coffee, I'd appreciate it." I didn't mention names. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain. Women my age know better than to overstate the obvious. He replied the next morning. "I was hoping you'd reach out. We met at a cafe neither of us loved. Neutral territory, bad chairs, Excellent anonymity. He arrived early. So did I. Of course we did. People who've been betrayed develop punctuality as a coping mechanism. Gary was taller than I expected. Quieter, too. He had the look of a man who'd been sleeping beside questions he didn't want answered. When he smiled, it was careful, like he was checking for cracks. We didn't start with small talk. "I think they're seeing each other," he said, wrapping both hands around his coffee like it might run away. "I know," I said. "I found her earring." He blinked, then laughed once. Dry, disbelieving. "She always wears those," he said. "Gold. Simple. She says they're her signature." Signature. I like that. We sat there for a moment, two people staring at the same invisible object from different angles. No shouting, no tears, just a strange mutual relief. "I don't want to explode my life," Gary said carefully. "I just want to stop feeling crazy." I nodded. "Same. I've already done crazy. I'm aiming for precise. That's when something settled between us. Not romance. Not even friendship. Something cleaner. Alignment. We compared notes like accountants, dates, excuses, patterns. The overlap was surgical. Once you stop lying to yourself, the math becomes very simple. Before we left, Gary hesitated. "They're going to be at the fundraiser," he said. "I know," I replied. He studied my face like he was trying to decide if I was dangerous. I smiled. "I'm not going to cause a scene." He relaxed. Poor man. As we stood to leave, he added, "If you need anything." I thought of the earring, the chili oil, the stage already set. "I already have," I said. Outside, the wind picked up. I buttoned my coat and walked away, feeling something unfamiliar and deeply welcome. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither were they. The night of the fundraiser arrived dressed as an occasion. The rooftop was all glass and soft lighting, the kind designed to flatter donors and blur consequences. The city stretched behind us, confident and indifferent. Everyone looked better from that height, more successful, more moral, more in control. I chose my dress carefully. Black. Clean lines, no sparkle. The kind of dress that doesn't ask for attention because it assumes it's coming. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked centered. My husband noticed, which was annoying. "You look great," he said, surprised in a way he probably didn't mean to be. "Thank you," I replied, not returning the compliment. Balance, after all. Inside, the room hummed with money and restrained egos. Glasses clinked. Laughter floated just a beat too long. I accepted a drink I didn't want and held it like a prop. Years of being the wife had prepared me for this role. Tonight, though, I was auditioning for something else. I scanned the room once, and there she was. She stood near the railing, city lights outlining her profile like she belonged there. Hair pulled back, neck bare, except for, yes, the earrings. Gold, simple, sitting exactly where skin is most sensitive. For a moment, I admired her composure. She wore confidence the way other women wear perfume. Subtle, persistent. She laughed at something my husband said, her hand brushing his arm in a way that felt practiced but not possessive. Professional, intimate, efficient. I took a slow sip of my drink. Gary arrived 10 minutes later, right on cue, though we hadn't coordinated. He stood across the room, pretending to read a plaque. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. We were professionals, after all. Time stretched. There is a specific kind of waiting that feels luxurious when you're no longer afraid of the outcome. I watched conversations ebb and flow. I nodded. I smiled. I listened to a man explain blockchain like it was a personality. Then it happened. She reached up, just a small movement. A reflex. Fingertips brushing the lobe of her ear, as casual as adjusting a strand of hair. Her smile didn't falter, but something else did. A microsecond of confusion. A tightening around the eyes. Interesting. She touched it again, more deliberately this time. Shifted the earring slightly. I could almost hear the calculation begin. Heat? Irritation? Allergy? My husband kept talking, oblivious. Men like him are trained to believe women's discomfort is background noise. Across the room, Gary noticed. I saw his shoulders tense. He looked up, finally, and watched her with the focused stillness of a man who knows exactly what he's seeing but has spent years being told he's mistaken. She laughed again, too brightly, took a sip of her drink, reached for her ear a third time. This time, her smile cracked. Not publicly. Not enough for anyone else to comment, but enough. I set my glass down and adjusted my posture, suddenly aware of my body in space, grounded, solid, entirely my own. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. The room did the work for me. Gary took a step forward, then another, stopping just short of them. He said her name, calmly, clearly, not loudly enough to draw attention, but not softly enough to be ignored. She froze. My husband turned, confused, the way men do when the narrative shifts without their permission. "I think you're having a reaction," Gary said, eyes on the earring. "You might want to take it off." Silence, brief but surgical. She then at my husband. Then finally, at me. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, under soft lights and charitable intentions, with the city watching from behind glass, the truth settled into the room. Not dramatically, just enough to itch, and no amount of grace could make it stop. The body betrays us long before the mouth does. Her hand hovered near her ear like it had its own agenda. The skin along her neck had gone faintly red. Not alarming, not yet, but noticeable if you were trained to notice discomfort. And I was. I had been noticing it in myself for years. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. Gary didn't argue. He didn't need to. He simply stood there, calm as a man who has already cried in private and now prefers efficiency. "I've seen this before," he said mildly. "You always say that." That's when people started paying attention. Not the whole room, just the right radius. A few donors, a colleague or two. The kind of audience that thrives on plausible deniability. My husband laughed, uncertain. "I'm sure it's nothing," he said, instinctively stepping into the role of interpreter, fixer, the man who explains women back into silence. She touched the earring again. This time she flinched. It was small, almost elegant, but flinches have a way of announcing truths we've worked very hard to conceal. Her smile collapsed inward, like a well-managed budget suddenly missing a decimal point. Gary tilted his head. "You should take it off," he repeated, still polite, "before it gets worse." "I said I'm fine," she snapped, and there it was, the crack. Not anger. Fear. Fear has a particular tone when it realizes it's no longer in control. My husband looked between them, confused now in a way that couldn't be smoothed over. "Do you two know each other?" The question hung there, fragile and doomed. Gary smiled, and it was the saddest smile I'd seen on a man in years. "I'm her husband." That was all. No accusations, no volume, no pointing fingers, just a fact, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who has finally stopped protecting other people's lies. The room didn't explode. It never does. What it did was lean in. Her face went pale, then flushed deeper red as the irritation spread. She reached up, fumbled with the backing, hands suddenly clumsy. The earring came off and dropped into her palm, slick with oil and something like panic. She stared at it. At that exact moment, I stepped forward. Not fast, not slow, just enough to be unavoidable. "I found it in my husband's car," I said calmly, to no one and everyone. "I thought you might want it back." There was no gasp, just the sound of the city humming behind the glass. My husband's mouth opened, then closed again. A goldfish encountering philosophy. She looked at me, eyes wide now, not with anger but recognition. She knew exactly what had happened, and worse, she knew she deserved it. "This is absurd," my husband said, finally, voice tight. "We can talk about this later." Later is the refuge of men who are losing. Gary nodded. "Of course," he said. "We'll all have plenty of time." Security didn't intervene. No one raised their voice. The fundraiser continued its quiet orbit around us. Donations still being pledged, wine still being poured. But the damage was already done. The earring lay in her hand like a verdict. Her ear throbbed, her composure fractured. And every person within earshot had just been given a story they would repeat carefully, politely, and forever. I turned to leave. As I walked away, I heard my husband say my name, not loudly, not desperately, just enough to suggest he still believed he had access to me. He was wrong, because behind me, under the soft lights and charitable intentions, 2 marriages had just ended. And ahead of me was something far more interesting than rage. Relief. The next morning, I woke up alone in my own bed and felt an unfamiliar emotion bloom in my chest. Space, not loneliness, not grief, just space, clean, quiet, and unoccupied by other people's expectations. My husband hadn't come home. He'd texted sometime after midnight. "We need to talk." Men always think conversation is a repair tool. Sometimes it's just an autopsy. I made coffee and drank it slowly, standing by the window. The city looked the same. Traffic, sirens. A woman across the street walking her dog like nothing remarkable had happened the night before. I admired her for it. When he finally came home, he didn't look angry. He looked inconvenienced. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place where the earring had first sat like a small, quiet bomb. He started explaining. He always did. He explained the way other people apologize, thoroughly, persuasively, and without actually surrendering anything. It wasn't serious. It just happened. You know how these things go. I let him talk. There's a certain pleasure in allowing someone to finish the lie they're most proud of. When he finally stopped, he looked at me, hopeful. As if clarity might earn him mercy. I want a divorce, I said. No preamble, no tears, just a sentence that landed cleanly on the table between us. He blinked. That's extreme, I smiled. So is lying for years. The process that followed was not dramatic, it was procedural. Paperwork. Lawyers. Numbers. I hired a woman recommended by a friend who described her as gentle but fatal. She was worth every dollar. My husband learned several new things in a very short amount of time. He learned that being reasonable had never meant being powerless. He learned that assets remember who paid attention to them. He learned that charm does not hold up in court the way men think it does. The divorce was finalized quickly, efficiently, unfavorably. For him, he lost more than money. He lost credibility. At work, whispers replaced certainty. Positions shifted. Invitations stopped arriving. People who had once laughed at his jokes now watched him with polite distance, as if he were a cautionary tale wearing a suit. Gaslighting requires proximity. Once I stepped out of reach, it collapsed. I moved out of the apartment we'd shared, not because I had to, but because I wanted something untainted by compromise. I sold it while the market was kind and bought a smaller place with windows that faced the morning instead of the past. Gary called once. Just once. Thank you, he said. Nothing else. I understood. We had served our purpose to each other. Alliances like that don't need maintenance. As for her, I heard through the same efficient channels that she'd taken a leave of absence. Stress, they said. Allergic reaction, someone joked. Quietly. I felt no triumph. No gloating. What I felt was completion. Some stories end with fireworks. Mine ended with signatures and silence. And silence, I discovered, is an excellent upgrade. Because for the first time in decades, my life belonged entirely to me. No explanations required. I kept one earring, not hers, mine now. The twin vanished somewhere between lawyers and moving boxes like most things that outlive their purpose. But one remained, cleaned, neutralized, harmless again. I rinsed it carefully, the way you rinse a wound after it's done bleeding. I didn't keep it as a trophy. I'm not sentimental like that. I kept it as a reminder. My new apartment is smaller, quieter, and blessedly unconcerned with anyone else's schedule. Morning light pours in like it has something to say. I write now. Not professionally, at least not yet, but honestly. I write the way I wish I'd spoken for years, without apologizing for the length of my sentences or the sharpness of my observations. Sometimes I laugh at myself. A woman approaching 60, newly single, discovering freedom like it's a new app. But it's a good laugh. The kind that doesn't need witnesses. I cook what I want. I eat when I'm hungry. I don't explain my silences or soften my opinions. If I don't want to attend something, I don't attend. This alone feels revolutionary. The earring lives in a small dish by my desk. Occasionally light hits it just right, and I remember that Tuesday morning. The car, the radio, the moment my life quietly cracked open. People ask me how I'm doing. I say, better than expected, which is true. I don't tell them that betrayal, when it arrives late enough in life, is less a tragedy and more a correction. A brutal edit. A chance to cut what no longer serves the story. I also don't tell them about the chili oil. Some details are just for me. Every now and then, I think of her, of him. Not with bitterness, but with a detached curiosity, like characters from a book I've already finished reading. I wish them nothing. That's the most honest place I can reach. What I wish for myself is simpler. More mornings, more laughter, more moments where I recognize myself in the mirror and don't feel the urge to step aside for someone else. The other day, while cooking noodles, I reached for the chili oil and smiled. It turns out heat isn't just for flavor. Sometimes, it's how you wake up a life that's been politely simmering for far too long. And if I've learned anything at 58, it's this. Some women cry. Some women scream. Some women forgive. Me? I seasoned the truth, served it calmly, and finally, sat down to eat. A year later, on another unremarkable Tuesday, I found myself standing in line at a small neighborhood cafe I'd never noticed before. It had probably always been there. I just hadn't been. The barista asked how my day was going, and I surprised both of us by answering honestly. Good, I said. Not fine. Not busy. Good in the way you say it when nothing is on fire and no one is lying to you. I took my coffee to the window and watched people pass by. Young couples arguing softly, older women walking alone with an ease I used to mistake for loneliness. Now I knew better. Solitude, it turns out, is only scary when you've never been allowed to hear yourself think. My life is quieter these days, not smaller. Just edited. I no longer wake up bracing for someone else's mood. I no longer rehearse conversations in the shower. I no longer confuse endurance with love. These changes didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. It arrived in fragments, sleeping better, laughing more easily, realizing one day that my shoulders had finally dropped. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things ended. I think of the earring, the heat, the humiliation, the precision, and I understand something I didn't before. Closure doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from clarity. I didn't destroy anyone's life. I simply stopped protecting a lie that wasn't mine to carry. On my desk at home, the little dish is still there, though the earring is gone now. I threw it away one morning without ceremony. Its work was finished. What remained was mine. If there's a lesson here, though I hesitate to call it that, it's simple and a little inconvenient. It's never too late to wake up. Not at 20. Not at 40. Not at 58. Some women bloom early. Some women bloom after a fire. I bloomed when the noise stopped, and in the quiet that followed, I finally heard myself, steady, amused, and very much alive, say, "I'm going to be just fine."